we have two projects, two kind of like parallel paths. We have the placental mammal path, which is focusing on most mammals have a placenta, and there's actually several different placentas. And that project right now is not in the bag phase, which is probably what you vision. It's more in engineering in this synthetic uterine wall. Because what's great about the embryo is that the placenta hatches, and all that is done for us by biology. So I'm oversimplifying it, but we just have to create the right way for it to for the embryo to hatch the placenta and then attach into the actual uterine wall. And so right now we're building a synthetic uterine wall that can get all of the gas exchange, all of the excrement exchange, and all the nutrient exchange, so we can do all the chemical cueing. So right now we have a team that's been really working on a hydrogel and microfluidics device, so that we have this synthetic wall, so that we can have a place for a synthetic uterus, so that it can be the placenta can latch into and invade, which is pretty cool. And then we have a third artificial womb project, which is looking mostly for marsupials, because marsupials have a very quick gestation because they do so much gestation outside of the body.
Marsupials being
like kangaroos, Tasmanian tigers, Tasmanian devils, koalas. So a lot of it's a clade of mammals out of mostly Australia. And so what's interesting about them is because they don't have long gestations, the placenta, while they are technically placental mammals, the placenta doesn't invade the uterine wall. So we can actually do it all in a roller culture and medium. So we have kind of like this, we call it the Ferris wheel. We have a Ferris wheel system where it's like we could productionize and grow them in little vats that are moving. And it looks like a super scientific, super sci-fi Ferris wheel. That's much smaller, obviously.
Whoa.
Yeah. So those are our three projects. So none of those have yielded, just to be clear, none of those have yielded animals yet. Everything, the work on the woolly mice and the work on the direwolf all came through surrogacy. Yeah.
Got it. So these are the three models in which, and they represent pretty much the way nature also reproduces in that. So there is the exo-egg, and then there is the placental stuff, and then the marsupials.
And then even in the once we have the placenta stage correct, a project further along, there are different types of placenta. There's four major categories of placenta. It's not everything in a bag like we think of it, or as I thought of it before I started this. And so there'll be variations to that kind of middle line.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
And you know what?
It's a cool project. It's a super interesting project, but it's pretty long term.
You're selling it so short. Cool project. I think it's a historical project. I think what you guys are doing, I don't know if there's any other people doing it, but and you know, since I came to know about you and what you're doing here, I've always wanted to know, from the perspective of an individual, how does one even come up with an idea like this? Like, it's such a strange thing, you would not land across it. No?
So I want to blame, if you love it or hate it, you should blame George Church, because I always want to give credit where credit's due. George Church, if you don't know him, he's my co-founder. He's arguably the father of synthetic biology. He is, and he's 6'7", leads genetics at Harvard, has narcolepsy, and is seen as like and he's actually hilarious too. But he's actually seen as like kind of the father of genome engineering and whatnot. So when you probably if you read Walter Isaacson's book on CRISPR about Jennifer Doudna, he was one of the first people to actually use CRISPR in a lot of the core technologies around genome engineering. He's the first one to do really big multiplex editing, meaning editing multiple parts of the genome at the same time. So he's kind of like this father of genome engineering and reading and write technology. And you know, I'm a curious guy, so I was working on some other startups at the time, and I reached out to him because I thought that the intersection of like AI, eventually quantum, which is only 2 years away. Every 2 years I hear, and then in synthetic biology, being able to engineer life, and then even access to more waves of compute. I really think that you know, the ability to kind of engineer and guide and accelerate life is really an interesting concept. So I reached out to George just conceptually and said, is this something that, you know, is there a place for a software company in this? Because I was a software guy. And he said yes, and then he answered my question in like 6-8 minutes. And then I asked him, what else are you working on? And he started walking through all these different parts of his lab. And I said, if you had one project with unlimited capital and you could devote your rest of your life to, what would it be? And he didn't like like there wasn't a beat. He was just like, I'd work to bring back the woolly mammoth, reintroduce it in the ecosystem, and use those technologies for human healthcare and conservation. And I was like, are you serious? That sounds amazing. That's like insanely interesting. I kind of thought he was screwing with me. And then all night long, I started doing more and more research on George after our call, and there was this through line. So no matter what interview he was on or podcast or whatever, people would ask him about the mammoth. Like he couldn't get away from it. It was almost like, you know, the Moby Dick and the like white whale. Right. Like it was it was chasing him. The mammoth almost like spiritually was actually chasing him.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so, I mean, I'm just assuming when so you've discussed this with George, and George is the father of synthetic biology. And so, I mean, he's attended to that idea. He's thought about it.
Yeah.
But now you're going to venture capital, you're going to investors of some kind, because my thing here is somebody who's been in the field can listen to this idea or even say this idea themselves and not find themselves to be crazy. But the rest of the world is going to find you pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy. So I had started a handful of businesses. It's a weird origin story. And so like I talked to George, and then I said, you know, maybe I'll just invest in this. Maybe I'll just invest in it. Maybe I'll just fund it. I'm a trust but verify guy. So I spent a little bit of my money hiring a couple of scientists. They went and talked to a lot of different people. This was 2019. And I was running a defense company at the time, and that I was the founder and CEO of. So I was doing all this, you know, I was working on, and I thought, I actually didn't think at the time I would go build this business. I thought this would be like, I really like George. This is awesome. I'll fund it, right? I'll just fund it. I fund a lot of really weird science things myself that I get interested in. And so I thought I would do that. I hired some people to say, is this even possible? They were doing a trust but verify thing. All signs pointed back to George, which is crazy. Well, then something really interesting happened to me. 2020 happened, and I don't know if you know this was a small global pandemic. And in that, I got super sick. I most likely now, looking back and talking to doctors, probably got the OG COVID. And because I had been in Shanghai, I'd been in Tokyo, I had only been in the places it was hanging out, right? So like it was more than likely possible that I got it. And I got really sick. And I actually got, I was forced to quarantine. I didn't leave my house except for medical appointments for 11 months.
What? You were sick for 11 months?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so you got long COVID then?
No, and it actually attacked my heart. And there's this thing called the ejection fraction, which measures your heart efficiency. And you want to be in the 50s and 60s. And by the way, I'm totally healthy now. So spoiler alert, I'm fine. But at the time, my heart function got down in the low teens, which is like transplant level, and they didn't know what was wrong. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And you know, the good news is they always say that hindsight's 2020, and I don't think that's a coincidence with the year 2020, because I think it made us all like kind of reflect a lot. And in that, a couple things really interestingly happened to me in that year. One is I got to the point where it's like, do I just want to keep building software businesses? Is that why I'm here? Or is that valuable? Is that like I did a lot of interest. You know, if you're an extrovert and you travel all the time and you get locked in your house for 11 months, you either just go crazy, which is maybe I'd say 50% chance I just went crazy, or 50% you do some introspection. And so I was like, look, I want to change a lot of my lifestyle. I started focusing on health and wellness, started focusing on fitness, and I changed a lot of my decisions in that category. I then started thinking and reflecting, like, do I want to just go build software companies and whatnot? And you can call it fate, you can call it signs, you can call it whatever you want. But like, you know, when I would go, like I was going to these heart clinics, and like the nurse had like a elephant tattoo. Another woman had a Indian elephant pendant. So I was seeing elephants the limited time I left my house in those 11 months only for doctors, I was seeing elephants everywhere. It was on my brain. And so I just got, you know, I don't know if it was signs or the introspection, but I wanted to do something bigger. So I stepped away I brought in a CEO to keep scaling my previous company, Hypergiant, and a great guy from Vista Equity. And I said, look, you go do that. And they were like, what are you going to go do? I was like, I'm going to do something very different. And to your point about investors, I reached out to a handful of my investors that had funded several of my previous software companies, and they were like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And they were like, you should not do this. Like that was the feedback I got. They're like, you should not do this. And by the way, if you just want to start something new, we'll fund that. Right. Whatever you want to do, just go build another software thing. You built 5 software companies, just go build another software thing. And that's just not something that I wanted to do. And so I then took a step back and I said, who are the right investors to really get behind this, that are long-term vision, that care about impact, that know that if we're successful, that there will be societal ripples in eternity if we're successful. And so who are those people? Who are in my network? Who are the people that I know? And so I ended up saying, kind of going back to the drawing board and really thinking and coming up with that list. And then I made a couple calls and I got yeses. And by the way, the pitch was quite bad, just to be clear. The pitch was, we don't have a deal with Harvard. We've raised zero capital. I'll put in some money. We have no scientists on our team, and we have no license to any of this technology, and we have no idea if we'll make any money. Please give us your money. So it was a bad.
It's a high upside bet.
It was a bad. The thesis is George says we can do this. I spent some money verifying that we can do this, and we're pretty sure the path to doing this, if we're successful, the world's never the same, and I think we can make real impact. I think we get real value, and we can inspire the next generation. And the technologies alone, if we're successful, the technologies alone are worth billions of dollars on just the tech. And so with no monetization, just the value in the tech. And so that was kind of like the high level pitch. And many people knew George, many people knew me. And I think that combination, we had a couple investors. I saw one actually this last weekend that passed. It's a very well-known investor that I think very, very highly of. And he was like, I passed just because you had no scientist and you had no one. And I was like, yeah, but I also didn't build the software in my last business. I didn't build the satellites in my last business. I was like, I'm good at, I hired people much smarter than me. And so he laughed about it and he's like, I am following it very closely because I am excited that it's happening. And so it was very mixed in the early days. Some of my people that I delivered for in the past, I thought would just jump on board. They didn't. About half did and half didn't. And then I took a step back and said, who are the big crazy investors that would take a bet? That would take the bet. Right. And I think that I was trapped at my house, so I had lots of time to think. And then it actually, what was crazy though is from a purpose perspective and a fate perspective. Once we started raising capital and meeting with those people, we got yes after yes after yes. And we were only going to raise $8 million to start. We raised $16 million out of the gate before we even announced the company. We raised $16 million, and so we were kind of off to the races from day one.
That's crazy, bro. अभी तो हमने बिल्कुल surface scratch किया है. If you want to know कि क्या मस्त, interesting, innovative, unique conversation, which was a full conversation, तो आप जाओ main channel पे और click करो यहाँ.